Crimson Crossover Network. This is The Tide Machine with Charles Branch and Michael Southern. Welcome into The Tide Machine. I am Charles Branch, joined by Michael Southern. Alabama kicks off the new series with Eastern Illinois 1-0 as the Tide beats the Panthers 56-0 in Tuscaloosa on Senior Day. Michael, it was an expected result, but still never a bad game, of course, to be able to send your seniors out as winners, to keep an opponent off the scoreboard and to put 56 points up to finish the regular season in Bryant-Denny Stadium on Nick Saban Field.
No, always a good thing. And again, don't overlook the quality of the opponent. I know it wasn't up to par what you're expecting, but the best things out of that whole thing is you got to play a lot of people. I mean, you went deep on the roster. You allowed some people, some walk-ons, people that have sacrificed for the program in practice. You gave them a chance to play. I know that meant a lot, especially to Paul Outcaroof's nephew. So that was a good thing to see for him. I guess you were committed to running the ball. I don't know if that was just as a joke or not, but at least you were able to do that. Still not SEC competition, but again, you got to see a lot of running backs get some work in there. You got A.K. Deer in there. So all in all, a good thing, but make no mistake, that's not an SEC opponent. That's not a Power 4 opponent. That is a lower tier school, so you did what you're supposed to do. Obviously, there are some concerns about passing turnovers. We can get to that a little bit later in the podcast, but still, all in all, did what you needed to do. Now we know what lies ahead, so all focus straight ahead for the trip down to Jordan-Hare.
As you mentioned, ran the ball a lot, 8 rushing touchdowns for the team on Saturday. As you said, sending a message, I think, to the College Football Playoff Committee. Doesn't matter who the opponent is. Eastern Illinois, an FCS opponent, obviously 3-8 coming into the game, isn't going to grab a lot of headlines, but we've seen some of these other top tier teams beating up on weak competition in their own conference. So you do what you can, and like you said too, you got a lot of players in the game who have been giving a lot to this program throughout the year. And I think it's always great to send your seniors out with the win, but especially this group of seniors, which I will include last year's group of seniors in that as well. These are guys that now we're not just committed to Nick Saban, but we're committed to the Alabama program and what Kalen DeBoer is now trying to build at Alabama. And so I think it was great for them to be able to finish off their career at Bryant-Denny Stadium with the win, regardless of who the opponent was. Get out of there, I think, relatively healthy, although practice has been a little bit of a bugaboo for us here over the past couple of weeks. But now you get to focus your attention to what is the greatest rivalry in college football. I know a lot of the national media might want to throw out Ohio State, Michigan, or some of the others, but this is a game that defines college football and what rivalries mean in college football, because for Alabama and Auburn, this is it. As it's talked about, there are no professional teams within this state. College football rules this state. This is the game that everybody thinks about 364 days a year, and then you get to play it, and then you have bragging rights for the entire season. So we're going to talk about some games here in a little bit, but before we do that, Michael, I want to get your thoughts as someone who is not only an Alabama fan and has a rooting interest, but you've obviously covered many Iron Bowls as well. So talk about kind of the intensity, and as you prepared stories and got into the game, was there a little bit more intensity or a little bit more focus as far as your journalism and putting a story together when it was Alabama and Auburn?
You always prepare a little bit differently for Auburn, because just think about it. This game creates heroes in this state, sometimes even beyond the state. Players, coaches, they truly become immortalized with either program, depending on what happens in this game. If a huge play happens that wins the game, you're known from then on. You become a part of a Daniel Moore canvas. It's really important. It's something that people don't forget. That's what makes the rivalry so great. Look, you win or you lose, we got to live with them. We're all in the same state. We're in the same work office. Some of them are in the same home, so you can't get rid of them. We're stuck with each other. That's one of the things that makes it so intense, because you just don't want to have that uncomfortable feeling for the next 364 days. So it's a bit of a sense of relief and joy combined if your side wins. Look, I was fortunate enough that, I went to several Alabama-Auburn games at Legion Field when it truly was the 50-50 split. Granted, it truly wasn't a home field for Auburn. Alabama played home games in Legion Field. It truly was more of an Alabama field, but I did like the 50-50 ticket split. It was always an amazing sight to see half of Legion Field in crimson, the other half with orange and blue. Uh, Sometimes maybe I think about that would be nice to see, but again, with the current venues that each college has, you'll never see that again. Birmingham would have to build like a 105,000 stadium, promise all kinds of revenue guarantees to even get the programs to think about it. And even then, I don't think it's going to happen. So, Alabama Auburn always gets the sports writers in the state. They get a little extra attention. They're working on things. What if this happens? What if that happens? What can I write for people to remember that? Hey, I remember that story that Cecil Hurt wrote. I remember that column that Clyde Bolton wrote from Birmingham News. I remember this. I remember that. It's all part of the tapestry of this rivalry.
So I don't see Birmingham having a 100,000 seat
Nope.
stadium, but what I will offer to you instead is maybe the Talladega Super Speedway. Do you ever should they ever put the infield, make the infield the football field? And I'm not a NASCAR fan. I apologize to our NASCAR fans, but I know it can seat a lot of people, and you can probably get people on the track. How many people do you think you could get to an Alabama Auburn game if you played at the Talladega Super Speedway?
Well, during its heyday, Talladega would get up to about 150,000. So I think you definitely could do that depending on how you do the configuration. Um, Look, neither university is going to give up that home game going forward. And here's what's funny. If Florida and Georgia would ever break with tradition and let each one get a home game on campus, that thing will never go back to Jacksonville. I'm just going to tell you what will happen if they ever do that.
Well, as you mentioned, this is a game that has ended up on Daniel Moore's canvas a lot of times. It's a game that has a lot of phrases that come from it as well. The kick, bow over the top, punt, Bama pump, wrong way, bow. And one of the games that we're going to talk about or start off with is Kenny Stabler's run in the mud from the 1967 Alabama Auburn game in Legion Field. As you mentioned, the game used to be in Birmingham. Was a 50-50 split. This was a game that my grandfather and my great grandfather actually went to, as Alabama would end up winning the game 7-3. Kenny Stabler went 47 yards midway through the fourth quarter for the only touchdown of the game. If you ever watch the game, on YouTube or see an old highlight reel, you'll actually see some comparisons to what you've probably seen in previous games at Auburn with how muddy the field is. Because Auburn's notorious for overwatering their field because Alabama's got better athletes and they try to slow us down. So don't be surprised on Saturday if you see some Alabama players slipping because Auburn typically likes to over the water the field at Jordan Hare. But I actually didn't know as I was watching the highlights and going back at that game that Alabama's touchdown was set up by Auburn had the ball fourth down on the Alabama 30-yard line and was punting it because probably didn't have field goal kickers that could make it consistently, and it's definitely not in the mud. But a bad snap between the Auburn's punter's legs, he had to down it the Alabama 45-yard line, and three plays later, Stabler goes around right in for 47 yards for a touchdown. And I can still kind of hear it in my ears right now, John Forney's electric call of that Kenny Stabler run for a touchdown. It was quite a sight watching them play in the mud. I highly recommend finding it on YouTube. It was a game too where you had ranked Alabama playing unranked Auburn, which is going to be a theme, and we've got a stat for you here at the end, a little bit on that. But that is one of the iconic games of this Alabama Auburn series, and definitely on favor of the Alabama side because of Alabama being able to pull it out late, 7-3, and winning a classic game in Legion Field.
Well, just another instance where Kenny Stabler wasn't already immortalized. That play cemented his status as an Alabama legend. That's one of the plays that I always enjoy watching when they play. When they do the tradition video, and you'll see all the great plays on there. That's obviously one of the ones that stands out. That is always a favorite. If I'm not mistaken, I think I read that it was like the first night game at Legion Field for the Iron Bowl. They had that, and then of course they had the monsoon-like conditions. Then they're just slopping around truly in the mud. I mean, it looks really, really bad if you see that. But Kenny Stabler, Alabama legend, will always be an Alabama legend, NFL legend, color commentator on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. He is one of the immortals of Alabama football for this program. And again, that play is a delight. I agree with you. For the younger generation that are not familiar with that, they're not as familiar with Kenny Stabler. You need to go back, watch that game, at least watch that play. Left-handed quarterback from Foley, and let's just say he liked to have a good time. So he always tested Coach Bryant's patience. How about that? And he did the same thing when he was in the NFL. So Kenny Stabler lived life the way he wanted to live it. But by golly, he also played football the way he wanted to play it. And thank goodness he was good at it. And he was good for the University of Alabama.
Well, you mentioned him being a color commentator for the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and that actually leads us into our next game in 1999 in Jordan-Hare because remember him being on the call with Eli Gold in the booth as Alabama headed to the Plains for an opportunity to win the SEC West, continue a march to hopefully be in the national championship if things had fallen their way. But there was a lot of similar to maybe what Alabama fans feel now as far as the Auburn voodoo around Jordan-Hare and all that. Alabama had never won a game in Jordan-Hare Stadium, and Alabama was ranked, Auburn was unranked. Alabama was a better team, but I remember going into that game, there was still a lot of fear of can Alabama actually win a game in Jordan-Hare Stadium? And the game didn't start off well. At halftime, Alabama was down 14-6, but was able to find some magic in the second half and eventually pull out a 28-17 victory. But before getting into all the details of that, I know you were covering the game, so I want to send it to you and get what you remember as far as that 1999 game down in Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Yeah, so one of the fortunate times still working with the Tuscaloosa News, getting to cover the games. Look, every time we drove down to Auburn, to Jordan-Hare, up until 1999, there was always, I won't say dread, but like you just said, until you win down there, you don't know if you can win down there. And we had covered Alabama teams with Gene Stallings go down there when they were the better team and lose. You had the 93 game when Alabama should have won, gave up too many big plays, gave up too many wild things that happened. The Frank Sanders pass, miracle pass on that. 95, Curtis Brown scores a touchdown, but they rule him out of bounds. So, of course, Mike Dubose takes a really bad Alabama team down there, and they still should have won that one. So, we had our doubts. We talk about it on the ride down there. Man, Alabama should win this game, but until they do, Auburn's got the voodoo. And then going into the fourth quarter, here they are. They're still trailing going into the fourth quarter against Tommy Tuberville, and it took basically a few strange circumstances to occur, and then Sean Alexander was Sean Alexander. And once Sean Alexander became him, game was over. They couldn't stop him, and that was just a remarkable fourth quarter from Sean, rushing for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns in the last 15 minutes to put that game away and send Alabama to Atlanta.
Yeah, you talk about some strange occurrences. I know field goal kicking is on the mind of a lot of Alabama
Mm.
fans. Auburn actually to start the second half had a basically 7-minute drive, got all the way down inside the 10-yard line. And as I mentioned, they were up 14-6, so had an opportunity to make it a legit two-score game and missed a 22-yard field goal to open the third quarter. Alabama gets the ball, goes on an 8-minute drive, eventually gets stopped on the Auburn 5-yard line after going for it on fourth and goal from the 1-yard line. And then maybe one of the stranger decisions or one of the more questioned decisions of this rivalry was Tommy Tuberville's decision as Auburn got the ball to put Ben Lear dropping back for a pass, and Cornelius Griffin sacked him in the end zone for a safety. So you had the Auburn defense who had basically been on the field for 8 minutes. I think it was a 22 or 23 play drive that Alabama wasn't able to capitalize on. But one play later, they're coming back onto the field because the Alabama defense rose up, got the safety. And as you mentioned, Sean Alexander ran wild the rest of the game as Alabama would go on to somewhat cruise to a 28-17 victory, get the first win on the Plains, and would eventually go on to Atlanta, put it on the Gators for a second time that season, and was somewhat of a magical season because unfortunately it started falling apart for Mike Dubose the following year. So after that game, the next time that Alabama went down to Auburn was 2001. And I actually remember as a kid, all the Auburn fans were so excited about this game. Alabama was unranked. Alabama was reeling a little bit under Dennis Franchione in their first year. Auburn had Daniel Cobb at quarterback. They had Ronnie Brown. They had Cadillac Williams. And every Auburn fan that was a peer of mine was talking trash all week in school and thought they were going to put it on us. And lo and behold, Alabama comes out of Auburn with the 31-7 victory. There was all the talk about Cadillac Williams, and I want to say their nickname for Ronnie Brown was Hummer. Those two guys accounted for 41 total rushing yards for Auburn, whereas Santonio Beard and Ahmad Galloway attributed for 328 yards for Alabama. I think Santonio Beard called he and Galloway and Shawn Williams is part of that group as well, but I think they were titled Thunder and Lightning after that game because of how much success they had running against the Auburn defense. They Santonio Beard also had two touchdowns. There was also Andrew Zhao started that game. There was some question. Tyler Watts gotten hurt. Who was going to start? Andrew Zhao came in. You talk about making legends. That's probably a game that, increased Andrew Zhao's, immortality at Alabama as well, being able to pull out a 31-7 victory. And I know as I think a sixth grader at the time, that was really nice walking back into elementary school, having your chest out, being able to talk smack to all the Auburn fans after putting it on them in Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Well, that to me, and the whole of all the Alabama Auburn games I've been fortunate enough to watch or cover or attend as a fan, that is probably my biggest guilty pleasure of all of them. Because unlike most people, as we were heading down there to cover the game, I already had it mentally in my head, like, yeah, this may not be good. This may turn ugly. And thankfully, Tommy Tuberville did what Tommy Tuberville does. When he's a heavy favorite, he usually loses. When he's the big underdog, watch out. That's when he's at his best. And then yeah, that was the play where Andrew Zhao basically sidearms as he's being tackled to Jason McAdley right before half. You could have heard a pin drop as soon as Jason McAdley caught that ball because it was so unexpected, that play, and Alabama takes the halftime lead. And then Santonio Beard rushes for 199 yards. Ahmad Galloway rushes for 127. They just run all over them, and it was so great to see for Santonio. Santonio Beard was a very underrated and forgotten running back during the Alabama time. He was really, really good, really key figure in 2001 and 2002. And the best thing that I remember is that was the easiest ride back I've ever had from Jordan-Hare Stadium because those fans left that stadium midway through the fourth quarter. There was no traffic on Thatch or any of the other three avenues out of that hellhole because it's hard to get in and hard to get out. But and that was the easiest ride back. Cecil Hurd, Tommy Dees, and I think Barry Allen rode with us too. He actually hitched a ride with us on the way back. No traffic whatsoever. That was the nicest, smoothest, funnest ride ever back from Jordan-Hare Stadium. Normally, it's still congested and hard to get out of there, even after we've been there for a little while writing our stories after we've done our post-game interviews.
That reminds me. My history teacher went to that Iron Bowl. He was a big Alabama fan, still is a big Alabama fan. And that was also the year that they were trying to nickname Jordan-Hare Stadium the Jungle. They were always
Yep.
playing up the jungle, obviously playing Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle. And I remember him telling the story that as those Auburn fans started to leave early in the fourth quarter and midway through the fourth quarter, I think he got a little full of himself and jumped up and said, "Hey, where y'all all going? This is supposed to be the jungle." And and as we know, the classy Auburn fans that they are, I think some 70-year-old woman turned around and shot him the bird as well. So she's probably just trying to say War Eagle, I guess. But no, I remember that place emptied quickly, and that was a fun sight to see as well.
Look, okay, I'm gonna when it comes to fan bases, going down to Jordan-Hare is probably not one of my most favorite places to go for obvious reasons, but it's just so weird down there sometimes. Look, in 85, or no, I'm sorry, in 95, when Auburn won the game, when they ruled Curtis Brown out of bounds, even at the end of the game, they started throwing stuff on the field after they won the game, and I never understood that. They started throwing cups and ice all over the field, and I remember I saw it coming. I had to run into the tunnel, or otherwise I was going to get hit in the head with ice and cups. And I was like, "You won the game. Why are you throwing everything on the field?" I never understood their logic behind that.
To quote Hunter Johnson, it's different down there. We just wouldn't
It is.
understand.
It is very different. I don't understand it, and I never will.
Well, we couldn't get away from talking about the Alabama-Auburn rivalry and not talking about Alabama and their 2015 season as well. That's been a topic that I've liked to bring up a lot this season. That's again when another Alabama running back, Derrick Henry, ran wild against Auburn. He had 46 carries for 271 yards. Before I give my thoughts on the 2015 win against Auburn, I want to send it over to you. Because again, it's another game where Alabama was ranked, Auburn was unranked, but you hear it a lot from this Alabama fan base. And I get some of it that Alabama typically goes in this with something to lose. Auburn has everything to gain from this. As I tweeted out a couple weeks ago, Alabama goes into this game typically with the opportunity for a college football playoff spot and to be in the SEC championship, where Auburn's just competing to be bowl eligible. What do you remember from that 2015 game when Alabama went down to the Plains again?
Well, I remember right off the bat in the very first quarter, Derrick Henry was slipping and sliding like he was on a like on one of the slip and slide in the backyard. So we were all saying we were sitting in the press box, and the first thing we said is like, "Someone go find the equipment manager and get those cleats changed right now because something's not right." Pretty obvious the field was pretty wet, and Derrick Henry was slipping and sliding all over the place. I know they did make some equipment adjustment and things right at him. The one thing I want to also say about 2015, Derrick had a monster game, rushed for 271 yards, had a touchdown there in the fourth quarter. But don't overlook the fact that Adam Griffith goes in there, kicks 5 field goals after everyone blames him for coming up short on the kick six field goal. It really wasn't Adam's fault. Don't forget, Cade Foster misses or has a field goal blocked early in that game too in 2013. But I really appreciate the fact that Adam stuck with it, goes down into that house of horrors and sticks him for 5 field goals. So that was nice to see that he was able to. I won't say he was absolved of everything from the horror of 2013, but at least he left and had a good memory of the fact that he went back into Jordan Hare, kicked 5 field goals, and was a main reason that kept Alabama in it until they started to pull away.
Uh, And I do remember from that game too, Auburn's one touchdown was a play very similar to their touchdown in 2013 against Georgia, where through a pass over the middle, ball got popped up in the air, receiver kept running, and it just fell into his arms for a 77-yard touchdown reception. And so there was some of that where we had just hit Ardarius Stewart. Jake Coker had hit Ardarius Stewart. We were up 19-6, and then Auburn has that play to make it 19-13. As you mentioned, Adam Griffith would tackle on another kick to make it 22-13. And I'll never forget, I think it was 4th and 2. I think it was at the 25-yard line. You give it to Derrick Henry again, 46th carry. He hits the outside, and at the 10-yard line, he starts waving to the Auburn students as he starts going into the end zone. Just a classic image. I laughed really hard at that. It was awesome. And again, stadium started emptying very quickly, which is something that we like as Alabama fans. We don't have to wait until the very end. We have no problem with Auburn emptying the stadium early if that's something they would like to do this coming Saturday as well.
Well, if again, this is a big if, like everything else. Well, if you take the big play away, you don't win. But take away 2013 and the painful memory of the kick six. Outside of that, Alabama has had pretty much recent success in Jordan Hare overall, and they have actually turned the tide, so to speak, on Auburn as far as coming up with the new inventive ways to pull the game out. So again, 2013 will always be a painful memory because Alabama had an opportunity to go for a three-peat, something that had never been done, and that play happens. But outside of that, Alabama's actually had some pretty good success lately in that stadium, and they've used the reverse voodoo back on Auburn, especially last or in 2023 and in 2021.
I'd throw 2019 in that category as well with the two interceptions for a
Oh,
touchdown, one of those coming off of Najee Harris's back. But as we start winding down, I want to leave Alabama fans with this. You've noticed how I keep talking about ranked Alabama versus unranked Auburn. When Alabama comes into this game ranked and Auburn is unranked, Alabama is 28-1. The only loss is when Dennis Franchione was technically the head coach, even though he was on his way to Texas A&M a few days after that. For the series as a whole, Alabama leads this series 51-37-1. This is also the third time that Auburn will come into this game with an interim head coach. The two times previously, brother Bill Oliver in 1998 and in 2022 with Cadillac Williams, Auburn lost those games by 2+ touchdowns, 31-17 and 49-27 in 2002. So there's a lot of history that is on Alabama's side. You can call it the Jordan Hare voodoo or whatever you want, but as you just talked about, Alabama's turned that tide as well. And so my hope as far as fans, no, I won't be able to change the fans' minds, but I think our players should have a lot of confidence coming into this game because even more present day history, Alabama has made the tough plays a lot of times this year, and Auburn has fallen short. So is history just going to flip? Maybe, but history has not trended that direction, especially this season as well. So as we start kind of wrapping it up, Michael, what are your final thoughts going into this game on Saturday night?
Well, you're right. We're not going to fully relieve the anxiety that Alabama fans are going to have simply because you're playing Auburn in Auburn. They're always going to have the anxiety, but history tells you time and time again, the better team usually wins almost 97% of the time. Okay, so the odds are in Alabama's favor. They are the better team. They are the more balanced team. They should win. Could something crazy happen? Absolutely, but it's going to take something crazy. The odds are in Alabama's side when it comes to that. History is on Alabama's side. People who say the national pundits who talk about, hey, don't pay any attention to the records and all this stuff. Well, you might want to only in the sense that yes, the game is usually competitive, but the better team usually wins. Alabama's the better team. Alabama should go down there and win, whether that's by 1 point, 2 points, 10 points or 20 points, Alabama should win regardless.
They should. I hope Alabama's prepared for the field to be overwatered because that's what they like to
Yes,
do at Auburn.
yes.
It'll be a very cold game, something I feel like we've been used to in Tuscaloosa, especially in the early 2000s, some of those cold games, but maybe close to freezing temperature. So that'll be something new for an Alabama Auburn game down in Auburn. I know there's some of those that we've had in history, but not in recent history where it's been that cold. But as always, I'm excited to watch this team play. The resiliency that they have shown throughout the year, the toughness, the grit, the togetherness has been a lot of fun to watch. And of course, there is a lot on the line. If you're able to get this win, not only are they playing at the SEC championship, but you and me, we get to be back next week talking about Alabama's history in the SEC championship. So looking forward to that opportunity. Excuse me. And we've appreciated everybody that's been listening to us throughout the regular season. This is obviously a new project that we've started at Crimson Crossover, but we've had a lot of fun looking at Alabama football season through a different lens, looking back with all the history that we've had, being able to relive former plays, former players, former games. And we know we're still going to have an opportunity to do that this season, whether it's immediately in the SEC championship and into the college football playoff or eventually into whatever bowl game Alabama's going to be in. So stay with us. We'll obviously be tweeting our schedule on X. And again, hope to be with you next week as well. Excuse me, guys. Um, we got a lot of things going on at Crimson Crossover. Michael's got the Blue Collar Podcast with Emily Smar. We've got Crimson Crossover. We've got Crimson Crossover Cross Court. We've got a ton of basketball content on both Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And then highly recommend that you follow Coach Harper Breakdowns as he's giving you an inside look on what Alabama's doing on both the offensive and defensive side with some film study on the basketball court. Still got the M3 show with Matthew, Mac, and Josh. We've got Golf Adjacent with Ken and Claycomb, and we'll be kicking up the Weekly Joe here at pretty soon as baseball season is quickly approaching as well. So we reached 500 subscribers. We'd love to get to 1,000. If you're watching this video, subscribe to Crimson Crossover. Subscribe to all of our accounts. You can follow them. You can find them in the show notes. We're having a lot of fun doing this. We're having a lot of fun being able to talk about our passions, talking about Alabama sports. And we want to keep doing that and want to be able to keep sharing this with you as well. So, Michael, any final thoughts before we sign off?
Now, this has been fun. Look forward to future episodes, especially as the postseason comes up. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of good stuff. If you love Alabama, regardless of the sport, I think you're going to find something you like as far as all the content that's being churned out right now. And it's all good stuff by people who love it, who care about it, and bring passion, which is what you would want if you're going to watch some of these podcasts. So all I can say is roll tide and let's go down to Jordan here and get a victory.
That's right. It's Thanksgiving week. We're thankful for all of you. We appreciate you watching. Everybody have a safe Thanksgiving, a safe weekend, and we look forward to talking to you hopefully next week, talking about Alabama's history in the SEC championship. Roll Tide.
Roll tide.
The Paul W. Bryant Museum is a captivating destination for sports enthusiasts and fans of the University of Alabama football program. Located in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the museum is dedicated to preserving the legacy of the legendary coach Paul Bear Bryant. The Paul W. Bryant Museum showcases a remarkable collection of memorabilia, including trophies, photographs, and artifacts that span Bryant's career and the rich history of Alabama football. Visitors can explore interactive exhibits and learn about the team's storied past, making the Paul W. Bryant Museum a must-visit for any football aficionado. Fans can also experience exhibits highlighting success of both the Alabama men's basketball and women's softball programs. Open Tuesday through Sunday. Plan your visit today and experience the rich tradition of Alabama athletics. Roll Tide.